Let's talk SARMS. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my background first, and then I'm very curious as to some of your experiences. So I kind of was one of the first people talking about SARMS on YouTube. I started in 2012, and that was when I ran my first cycle. And so at the time, all you could buy was MK2866, S4, and then there were just a very few sites that sold MK677. And I'm not shitting you, man. It was like 250, $300 a bottle. And like raw materials for MK677 back then were insane. And I had found that out later on because I didn't understand the cost. So my first cycle was just Osterin and Android, period. And honestly, to this day, and I've ran nearly everything, that was the best experience. Now, granted, it was my first time using them, so that probably had something to do with it. But what I'm curious to you is, what was your first SARMS cycle, and have you used them all? And if you haven't, what is your favorite so far? And then, sorry to make this a long part question, but beyond that, if you haven't used them all, what are you looking forward to using?
Yeah, so actually, the first SARM that I ever tried was Osterine. So back in 2017, I got a hair transplant and I decided to hop on finasteride. And I was aware that there could be some potentially negative side effects. And so to counterbalance that, I thought, okay, I'll try some Osterine.
Right.
Right. And I ended up experiencing some fairly severe side effects. And it was probably more because of the finasteride, but I actually started experiencing a little bit of gyno, severely decreased libido. And so I discontinued all of that within a few weeks. Right. So I wouldn't even really consider that initial Osterine cycle like a real full cycle, you know. But after that, I experimented with MK677 and I had very positive results. And then recently, over this past year, I experimented with AC262. And so my philosophy is that I want to only utilize the least suppressive SARMs, right? Part of the whole Natty Plus philosophy is that in order to mitigate drug abuse, right, we want to only incorporate specific supplements that you don't rely on, right? So that's one of the disadvantages of something like exogenous testosterone is obviously if you stop taking it, you're going to experience terrible side effects. You're going to feel awful, and that incentivizes you to keep taking it or take more, right? So the idea with any Natty Plus supplements, the idea is if you stop taking them, then you essentially revert to baseline or stay above baseline. So you don't build a reliance. You don't have to rely on these supplements. You don't get addicted to them.
Right.
And yeah, ideally you would incorporate supplements that act as some sort of PCT, but the idea is that you don't necessarily have to. Any cycle that I've ran, if I stop, I essentially revert to baseline. There aren't severe enough side effects to make me feel like I'm addicted to that supplement. So in terms of SARMs, there are some SARMs that seem to be fairly suppressive that people have taken, and they've elicited some pretty severe side effects once they stop. And so I like to be selective
Right.
of my SARMs, right? And so AC262 is essentially the only one that I really utilize. I want to experiment with more like the ACP,
Yeah.
ACP
105.
that
Yep.
one seemed ACP 105. That one seems to elicit minimal side effects as well. But those are the SARMs that I'm really interested in, is those SARMs that seem to be minimally suppressive and have very low side effects, because I think that those align with the Natty Plus philosophy the most.
Right.
So yeah, the only real SARM cycles that I've completed are AC262 cycles, but I plan to experiment with more minimally suppressive and SARMs with minimal side effects in the future.
Yeah. So obviously you're going to avoid like an S23, an LGD 3303, YK11. Those are on the higher suppressive side. My thinking or recommendation, and obviously it depends on whatever goals that you have. S4 has always been one of my favorites. Now, obviously, there's the possibility of the vision side effects, which I'm sure you're aware of, but suppressive wise and overall side effect wise, it's going to be on the lower side for you. And that's one I would look at. ACP 105 is similar to S4 and how it acts. The concern there is the headaches that you can get. Not everybody gets them, but that's another one that would probably fall in line with you. Then I don't know, and I wanted to get into your training, but so I'm a 10 mile a day runner. So GW 501 516 is like my favorite. It always has been. But it's not for everybody. And SR 9009 and those both being non-suppressive might be something that you'd want to look at too. I think you'd like them both a lot, honestly. And I call GW the ultimate performance enhancer because it's not going to on the surface give you any size at all, but because it allows you to do so much and so much output, if you're taking that with anything, it's going to, like, I call it the enhancement for your enhancer because it takes you to another level of your training. So that's another one that you may want to, look at later on down the road when anything that you run it with, honestly.
Yeah, I think GW is something I really need to try because I get so many questions about it. And I actually haven't experimented with any of those endurance boosting research chemicals yet. So I think that that's something that I need to do, at least for a little bit. That's very interesting about S4. Yeah, I didn't know that it had that level of suppression. So maybe it's
Yeah.
something that I should try. So yeah, I definitely want to experiment with different compounds like that in the future. So yeah, especially just so I have experience, so I can give advice to people,
Yeah.
and the experiments always make for great content. So yeah, I should definitely experiment with that in the future.
So S4, if you were going to take S4 and pick out a steroid it's similar to, you would be looking at like an Anavar or Winstrol. And it's going to make you very nice muscle hardening. It made me extremely vascular, and I'm a leaner guy on the surface, but it really popped veins a lot. But here's the thing that's impressive about it the most is the strength. I'll put it up against almost any SARM in terms of strength. Now, S23 and 3303, those are more like steroids, so I can't put it on that level, but I'd put it up against damn near any other SARM for strength. So just something to keep in mind on what you could get from it. Not everybody gets the vision side effects, and it's very subjective to the person because there's no way to predict that. But aside from that, I mean, it's even got benefits for your prostate, which is rather shocking. I mean, considering. But suppression is generally pretty similar to like an MK2866, maybe like an AC262. So it'd be on the smaller end for you.